class of '81 from Texas A&M. 67 years old. It's a great year to be alive. And the reason I'm running is because we had lived overseas for 18 years. And when we came back, we realized something was not quite going right in Texas. And I started investigating and realizing that there were a lot of problems. And it seemed like all these problems crossed the governor's desk. Problems with housing affordability, problems with nuclear agencies starting to want to put in untested nuclear electricity generators 5 miles from my home, problems with water, problems with transparency in local government, and problems with immigration, and problems with let's see. I did the affordability. Oh, the health care. The FDA is snookering us with rules that don't allow non-patented drugs to surface and be used by doctors. And have I left off the space program? It's not about Mars. It's about domination of low Earth orbit and having a monopoly over world internet. And that's all starting right here at the governor's desk. So I decided that the best way to run an informational campaign and maybe be a David and Goliath and win against a giant, I would put my name in the hat to run for governor.
All right, well, let's kind of delve into your background here. You grew up in Houston, and I know you're in Bryan, as you did say, but you've spent several years abroad, including Israel, Estonia, Jordan, and Russia. You spent most of your time in Russia for 12 years and even raised your family there. What brought you back or brought you to Eastern Europe and in the Middle East? And how did your time abroad change your worldview? It's a long time being there for 12 years. What did you find the most interesting in the world and outside of the U.S.?
Well, the thing that got me and my wife to Russia after having a successful career in engineering in the petrochem industry for 7 years with Amoco, and then 5 years with the space program with IBM Federal Systems, was I'd been praying for people, believers that had been put in prison for a long time, as a teenager. And when the wall came down and the opportunity from the Minister of Education said, yeah, we need volunteers to come teach our school teachers what the Bible is, because we want to get back to a Bible-based nation like we used to be 70 years ago. We raised our hand and said, we'll go. And many times I've asked God, why would you have taken us to Russia more than just to tell the people about you? But it was an eyeful when we saw the freedom come to the people that didn't know what freedom was. And then, like the first election, there was only 5% people who voted for the local mayor in St. Petersburg, a city of 6 million people. We began to see how propaganda would easily sway people. And when we got back to America, we realized the same thing's happening here. We are just as culpable to being led by, I'm sorry, the media. Yeah, not everyone's a part of that group, and the fact that y'all are having me on is very hats off to you, that you're interviewing someone that's has a 0% chance of winning when other media outlets are not even touching me.
Well, Mr. Achgill, let's kind of move on here to talk more about your professional background. You touched on it just now, but your background in chemicals and mechanical engineering. You worked at a chemical plant for 7 years. You worked for IBM and the space shuttle program for 5. Tell us more about that.
Well, I like to solve problems. I realized that very early in life, and I realized that mechanical engineer would be the way to go, use that skill, that desire. Yeah, at Amoco, I got a chance to test out the ability to do problem solving, and those skills are very related to to the job of being a governor, because our world is a high-tech world, and we have computers, we have industry, we have safety issues for the public, and all those things I got to test the waters with at Amoco. One job, my boss said, all the engineers have looked at this, the headquarters has looked at this. We know we have to spend $5 million to put in a new fire water system, but we're going to let you look at it, and you just see if you see any way around having to spend $5 million, because 40 years ago that was a lot of money. Well, I studied it, and I came up with a solution that was $2,500, and so I began to realize that with prayer and with polished skills, there's a lot of things out there to be able to be discovered to help keep people safe. Because if a fire happened in a chemical plant that had 7 chemical units and it couldn't be put out because the fire water system went down, well, the public is seriously at risk. Back over now to the space program. After this new thing called the computer came out, I began thinking, well, maybe I need to try to go do something with computers. So I got a chance to switch over to from the petrochem to the IBM, and my boss came to me and said, well, we're all developers here, but you're an engineer. We have a contract to put all the failure modes of the space shuttle into a single database so that managers can do quicker assessment of flight safety. This was right after the Challenger accident. So I interfaced with 18 different contractors that were supplying all the software and hardware for the space shuttle. I got knee deep in how things could blow up and how it could hurt people and how it could mess up a multi-billion-dollar industry of the space shuttle, and I also got a chance to learn about special needs. My last few weeks was on a project to do special needs adaptations for all the Veteran Administration offices throughout the country, for people that were blind or had special needs with their not being able to use a mouse and such. And that prepared me for my next step, which, when we got to Russia, I began to realize that the world could be really helped by things that could be used by, the computer could help people to, for instance, for the deaf to be able to learn to read. And I started the project that I've been working on for 30 years, a crowdsourced program to help people learn to read their mother tongue, their local business language in English. And at the same time, the 6-year-olds will learn the hand signs and be able to turn to their deaf brother or sister and help them have access to language for the first time in their life. If they don't have access, then they become language deprived, and then they'll never be able to have language access for the rest of their lives. So engineering just opens a lot of doors for solving problems, whether it's in the chemical plant or in the space or right across the globe with the 50 million deaf in the world that don't have access to literacy.
Well, Mr. Achgill, let's talk a little bit about those lessons that you have learned, because it's not just those lessons that you've learned. You've also learned some lessons from your first campaign in office. You ran for Bryan City Council in 2024. What inspired you to run in the first place, and what lessons did you learn specifically in your first campaign?
Well, I realized that I was praying over what 5 things I would do, what would be my campaign pillars, and one of the top ones was water, and another one was child trafficking. In Bryan, we had 400 in Brazos County. We'd had 400 missing persons the year before, and it was just like, this is a chance to I mean, people have been talking about this for a long time, but so another one was something simple like they put in medians down the middle of a road in our town, and the fire safety just went to pot. The response times went to pot, and businesses were going out of business because they couldn't get their customers to them. But I realized after the campaign, I went to the first city council meeting after I lost to see the swearing in and wish them well. And and the first thing on the agenda was that the city's running out of water. And I listened to the pitch that they gave, and they said 6 months before, in May of 24, they had gotten notice that that the city was downgraded from 50 years of water security to 8 to 10 years, and I just was floored. And so they had the open mic, and I said for the citizens, and I was the only citizen there. Um, I asked them, why did you wait for 7 months during an election cycle to tell people of this news? And no answer, because it's open mic. They don't give any answers to that. And then they went to. I thought, well, if they're not going to say anything about covering that up, and not, so transparency was a big issue. I had been on my campaign. I had been asked before an audience, alongside all the other candidates. They said, well, what's your biggest issue? And I said, water, water, water. No one else said water as their biggest issue. And all those guys running that had been incumbents, they must have known that for 7 months we were running out of water. And this was during an election. And so I thought, there's transparency has gone amok in Texas at the city level. So that's I I tried running up things up the line. I tried whistleblows with the SEC, because the same city, my city, had gone to get their bond rated to borrow $50 million for a water project that, if they don't have any water in 10 years, why would you borrow? Why would you lend $50 million to a city? And I found out that the bond rating agency had not been told about this detail. And so I'm running for governor because the Ethics Commission, 3 of the people on that board, they're appointed by the governor. So, yeah, all the roads pass by the governor's desk. Whether it's space, space should not be given to one company, one entity. It's a new resource, as much as oil under the ground 100 years ago, when people homesteaded their property, was a right that they would be given for all their generations that follow them. Space is the new oil. We're looking at when the monopoly starts to take place, in 2 years after Starship starts to fly operationally. SpaceX is asked for 42,000 satellites to put in orbit. That's just enough. I did the calculation. That's just enough to take over and seize the whole world internet market, which is valued at $1.7 trillion a year. There's a newspaper out of Austin that said, the candidates that are running, it's a big deal because Texas is the 8th largest economy in the world. Well, the news is, after Starship starts flying, if all the money for those resources for access to space would go to the citizens of Texas, which they rightfully should, that would double the size of the Texas economy. We would go from being 8th to being 3rd economy in the world. But right now, it's all set up to be all into one company, one man's hands. And I think that's not right. It's the biggest bank robbery in history that a launch company is able to launch from the middle of a game preserve where they only had to buy 200 acres. They should have had to spend $25 billion to have a launch site, a proper launch site that wasn't 6 miles away from South Padre Island with 30,000 people on a sunny day. They should have had to, uh, so just like Norway back in the 70s, they they set up a deal where all the people would own part of the oil under the North Sea, and they would control what would be done with that oil. We should be doing the same thing. And many years later, Norway is the third largest investor in the world. That trust fund for the citizens is the third largest investor in the world. We will dwarf that if we do the same Norway kind of give it to all our citizens, because $1.7 trillion in 10, 15 years, SpaceX or Elon or whoever is holding those purse strings, they will be bigger than the United States in value, because the United States has a lot of debt, but all that's going to be debt free. The 1.7 trillion is just going to continue to stack up, and it's a national security problem. When you have one company controlling the communications in the world, if that's all spread out across all Texans, you're going to have a safer space, you're going to have a safer internet, and we're not going to be, we're going to have freedom of speech. Right now, for the last year and a half, I've been shut down on my X account just because I said something a little bit inquisitive about should the military be involved with decisions about launch safety. I put in a request to the Army Corps of Engineers about maybe not being safe for the launching such a big rocket so close to South Padre Island. No feedback, no transparency, and my X account got shut down that day. And now I'm running for a governor office, and it's still shut down. So, and yeah, that I probably over answered your question. You just hop in there and
You're totally fine. You're totally fine. We're going to talk a little bit about your website, though. So let's move on and talk about your campaign. Let's delve into the priorities listed on your website. Governor Abbott, he's focused much of his reelection campaign on tax reform. What's your plan when it comes to property taxes, and how will you work to making housing more affordable?
well, when you start peeling the onion about housing affordability, if you go, it's like playing chess versus checkers. We've been playing checkers when the people who the hedge funds are playing chess. If you can if you can make the narrative of, well, housing affordability, it's going to be a lot more if you don't have to pay as much tax. If you can peel back that onion layer, you can realize that as you lower the tax on homes, you make it easier for hedge funds to make easy money off of buying houses, and which they have been doing for the last umpteen years. They've been buying them like stocks. And as they buy a house that doesn't have, if the house doesn't have any tax, then there's no service charge for them owning that property. And then we are in the marketplace, young families, old families, whatever, we've been competing against hedge funds for the same property. And that drives the prices up. So California is a good example of that. Proposition 13 in the early 70s said, we're going to do away, lower the house tax. Now their houses are 3 times more expensive than our houses. Their curve has gone exponentially higher on unaffordability of houses, to the point where if well, part of the thing that exacerbates is their problem is they don't have any. Okay, what's the solution? Their problem is they don't have a good homestead exemption law. It's just fluff. Ours, if we double, my plan is to double the homestead exemption for all ages, not just elderly, and then leave the tax the same, because then the hedge funds are going to start wringing their hands and going, we're having to pay a lot of tax every year for owning this, this real estate. So they're going to start dumping their properties. That's going to end up slowly bringing the cost of houses down and more affordable. And as the houses become more affordable, there's less interest every year that people are having to pay, families. So then they, because of instead of the money going to the banks on interest, they'll be able to afford paying the taxes easier. And the taxes will be smaller because the houses are now cheaper. So it's a, it's a little bit of a long game to get out of this hole, but you got to start with not lowering the taxes, because that's throwing gasoline on the fire. It's, and if you look at who has been donating to political campaigns, there's some hedge funds in there that are donating. Why would they do that? It's not about schools or school vouchers or and altruistic kinds of things like that. It's about our homes. It's about, they see our homes as piggy banks. They see the space program as a piggy bank. The A guy at one of the major papers in Houston said, "Well, Bob, how do you expect to win against a $100 million campaign?" And I said, "I believe that the story of David and Goliath is true." I got a smile from that. And he said, "Well, what are you going to do on the first day if you win?" And I started reading a long list of things. I got halfway through the list, and he said, I apologize for, I still had a few more to read. And he said, "Well, I guess you're praying for the day to get longer too, like it did in the Bible." We both laughed. But it's true. The only way a guy like me can win is by having Texans wanting to take back Texans to take back Texas. And the only way to do that is not through social media, it's through sending 5 notes to your friends with my with my website, which is an informational website. If all the candidates need to look what I have out there, and they need to either sign up for it as a like the Republicans did 30 years ago with Campaign for America or whatever it was called. There needs to be a Take Back Texas platform where all the candidates sign up and go, we're not going to let space resources be given away. We're not going to let data centers come in and take all our water. We're not going to let housing, the hedge funds take all our homes. And we're not going to be like California. We're not going to let our drinking water be polluted and our farmland polluted, like with HB 2549. They're going to allow fracking water to be treated and then put on farmland. And the technology is not there. It is going to pollute our farmland forever, because there's forever chemicals. The PFAS is in that water, and it's very hard technologically to get that out. The EPA has only banned 5 of the 2,000 components of PFAS and said they're carcinogenic. That's just because there hadn't been enough people die to know that the other 2,000 are also carcinogenic. And the bill they passed is only serving the oil and gas industry, so they don't have to re-inject all that water back in the ground, because they're having to shut down wells because there's no more, they're overpressuring on trying to re-inject the water. So what's the solution? HB 2549. Let's just let it all be cleaned and dumped out into our rivers. Well, that's just going to pollute Texas. We're going to be one national disaster. Just like Johnson County has been a national disaster. I mean, you probably saw it in the news about a year ago. A rancher had to shut down his ranch because PFAS got on his property from some sludge that our Texas watchdogs for making sure we don't have chemical contamination still have turned a blind eye to that, and they had to shut down their whole ranch. So um, I don't know what question I was answering.
Mr. Achgill, let's move on here to talk more about healthcare. A pretty important topic, and I do have a lot of questions here for you, so stay with me. You talk about, excuse me, desiccated thyroid versus synthetic T4. Can you explain to our viewers exactly what you mean for those unaware about this issue?
Okay, I'll answer that. And first, let me say what my website is. It's www.hishandsreader.org/Bob. That's my worldwide literacy research website where I distribute free crowdsourced literacy material for many different countries. Okay, so the deal with reverse T3 and T3, those are thyroid components. Thyroid is it's the energy source for every cell in our body. Back in the 60s, the FDA approved synthetic versions of thyroid. Many people have to take thyroid. Predominantly more women than men, but because of the environmental things that happened in the early 60s and on, like having carpets in our homes, having plastic components in our cars. You love that new car smell. Well, there's plasticizers in that. And so what's been happening is what the body does is it has something called reverse T3 that it will start producing the antithesis of T3, which is the energy component of thyroid. That's what gives the cells all their energy. It'll start producing the reverse T3, which is the putting on the brakes for the metabolism or body. Back in the 60s, they decided to take away the normal thyroid from from doctors, and so the normal thyroid used to come from the pig or the cow, and it had T4, T3, T2, and T1 in it. But when they took it away, they did not study what they were taking away when they were going to only be giving T4 for thyroid patients. Well, T4 is the inactive form of thyroid. And I know this is getting a little heavy, but it's like the gas pedal on your car. All the cars in have to run on like 96 octane. Well, if you put in 98 octane or 94 octane, your car is going to be sputtering. Well, the bodies across America are sputtering because of our environment, we have a lot more production of reverse T3. And that slows down our metabolism, and it can be a root cause for any and almost all chronic disease. So I am advocating for Texas to push back on the FDA, and we're going to fund FDA quality research into this phenomena of the balance between reverse T3 and T3, because that is putting on the brakes on everyone's metabolism. And it's it's uh, it it's another bank robbery. We have to be very careful about people trying to steal from us, whether it's the space access or water that once it's gone, we're not going to have any more in our aquifers. We're going to wake up one day and all our cities are going to be without water. And it's also true of health.
All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about how you support Medicaid and Medicare. You have a quote on your website: the state already invests public money where private incentives fall short because society depends on them. Healthcare is no different. Are you in favor of universal healthcare or a public option? Would you enact the ACA Medicaid expansion? And what's your plan for making healthcare more affordable and better quality?
Well, the T3, the reverse T3, the FDA research into non-patented drugs, I would use a small tax on patented drugs to fund that process of researching the non-patentable drugs. If you look at the curves back starting in the 60s, we went from a linear increase on healthcare cost to exponential. And my math teacher in 12th grade said, anytime you see a change in a curve like that, there's a function change, and you have to go look and see what's causing the function change. Well, ground zero for that is that changing the population carte blanche over from regular thyroid to synthetic. That's when the perfect storm happened. We started getting all the plastics in our lives and all these things that were causing inflammation and the stress in our lives. Both stress and inflammation cause the production of reverse T3. If you put a cap on that, if you cut the head off of that snake, you're going to have, instead of being 10x more cost on healthcare in the last 70 years, we're going to be able to ramp that back to have healthcare being more affordable, because people are not going to be getting 1, 2, and 3 chronic diseases like they didn't used to. But but we've had exponential increase in multiple chronic disease, and that's because, and so that plays into, every time you have a chronic disease added, you have a huge cost added to healthcare, because those things are things you have to take expensive drugs every day for the rest of your life. And if we can cut that out, we become more healthy people by reining back big pharma and getting the right things into our body, letting doctors do the doctoring, then we're going to be solving the other part of it's a small issue, but we can also be saving on the, if we deal with the immigration side. We have people going into and treating ER rooms like doctors' offices, and that could be $10,000 a pop every time someone goes in for at midnight they go in to deal with a fever. Um, we're Yeah, immigration. There's a very um, kind way to deal with immigration laws. I've lived in many different places, seen a lot of different immigration issues, and we are just doing it all wrong. The rest of the world doesn't do it like us, and we should be doing it in a way that honors the countries that the people are coming from, help them have a better economy, help them have an on-ramp to be able to go back home and then live where grandmother and grandfathers are still living, and the children to be able to grow up and have better health care, because health care in other countries is a lot cheaper. We should still be helping them, maybe giving a stipend for them to go and not just be totally destitute when they go back for the first 7 years, and making sure their children are still getting educated through literacy. Literacy is the ground floor for helping any economy to rise up. So we should be doing that responsibly by having an e-verify system that has a fine on it. I tried to get a roof on for 5 years with having legal workers. I called companies that were the select roofing companies from the state of Texas, from the insurance boards, and the guy told me, we cannot put together a legal team. Here we have a major company put together by and enforced by the insurance companies, that's directed by the governor, and they say they can't put together legal teams to put on a roof. Something is broken in this system, and it's endemic, starting at the governor's desk.
Well, your campaign has put a big emphasis on space, and I know you chatted a little bit about it in the first half of our interview, but you state on your website Texas helped give birth to a monopoly over world internet and free speech by allowing a single corporation to dominate low Earth orbit, referring to SpaceX's Starlink satellites. Why is this issue important to you, and why should voters care about SpaceX?
Uh, Well, I gave my background about having worked on putting together all the failure modes for Challenger. I was knee deep, arm deep, swimming in the pool of what's a space program should be doing. And when I went down to see where the rocket was launching from in Boca Chica before it launched, I said, this is not right. This is 6 miles. I can see the windows on the apartment building 6 miles away on South Padre Island. The shock wave is just going to really, really hurt people. Uh, so I wrote the FAA and I said, is there a failure mode for a launch that's been researched on for a launch pad explosion? They said basically no. Um, the when you do an environmental study, as they did, there should be an analysis for the worst case scenario of a failure. There was not. And even for the first launch, they admitted that they did not have that. Maybe they did it, but it was not public facing. So I've since I put in um, extensive comments for the Boca Chica, adding a second launch pad there, and I put in an extensive comment on their request to put in a launch pad where the Apollo mission went from KSC, Kennedy Space Center. I was not saying things that were not being said by one of the bigger United Launch Alliance. They also put in they said, yeah, if an explosion at KSC happens on the launch pad, it will likely shut down the launch pad that the Air Force uses for putting up spy satellites 6 miles away. Well, hello, South Padre Island is only 6 miles away from Boca Chica. If a launch pad explosion can shut down our access to space in a if we had some emergency where we had to put up another spy satellite, if it can shut down us being defended from friend or foe and at KSC, well, what's going to happen to the poor people at South Padre Island if there's an explosion? I detailed there's like 4 different things that are structurally wrong with the plan to put up 42,000 satellites by SpaceX. There's the national security issues. There's the monopoly issues. Anytime you start controlling social media, like shutting me down on my just because I said something a little bit like, well, it's not good to have military helping make decisions about flight so close to Texans. You're going to have you had the thing with Ukraine where Ukraine had surrounded the Russian army in the Black Sea, and Starlink shut down communication to the Ukrainian army. You would have the war in Ukraine probably would have slowed down or stopped if the Russian Navy had been stopped on that day. But
Mr. Achgill,
yeah,
I hate to cut you off, but we're running a little short on time here, so we need to move on here to the next topic, which is going to be education. You support the inclusion of the Bible in schools as a parental opt-in, and I know you talked about your religious views and viewpoints earlier here in this interview, but why do you support this, and are you in favor of access to other religious texts in schools?
well, the the Constitution, it's a great document. It was written by people that had a belief, a worldview that the Bible was foundation zero. If the Constitution is not backed with people that know the principles from an early age of respecting life, the principle of all life is important because it's made in the image of God, respecting other people because the same maker that made us says we should be loving other people as God loves us. If we don't have those things coming into a child's life at an early age as a choice, as a choice, then we are manufacturing a worldview for them that is another religion.
Well,
And that other
let's bring
religion,
that worldview back to East Texas, and let's talk about East Texas here. Kind of shifting our focus, the issue of water rights. You briefly spoke on them earlier as more of a wide range view, but focusing here on East Texas, let's talk about the groundwater pumping that's become a hotly contested issue within our region. Where do you stand on this issue? And do you have plans for data centers that have kind of stirred up the controversy, as you may have heard about across the country, including in our region? What's your take on this?
it's a myth. It's a narrative myth that we're running out. We're running a race with China on getting to AI into our whole world, because AI is going to sap the brains of all our children. If we allow children before they learn how to think critically, if we let them start letting AI direct their paths, their minds are going to be mush, and we're going to lose the race of the brain and the race of creativity with any other country. Let's get back to water. Most aquifers in Texas are close to being fossil aquifers. They do not fill up very fast after a big rainfall, like maybe the one near San Antonio. East Texas, once that swimming pool under East Texas is drained, which is going to be drained very fast, it's not going to be replenished. And if we are going to replenish, some people say, well, we'll just replenish it with water from the Gulf that's been cleaned up. Well, reverse osmosis. It's it's very expensive. You have to run a pump at 1,000 psi to get rid of to run the reverse osmosis process. That's a lot of natural gas you have to burn. And so the data centers are extracting natural resources and assets from Texas. And we are going to have to replenish. Once they move on, they finish draining our aquifers, we're going to be left with having to pay 5 to 10x more money to get the water back, which we're not going to have the energy then to do that, because the data centers are using all the energy of the natural gas. They're just hitting us from both sides when they put in. So my solution is put in an industrial water use tax, so that whether it's water pulled from directly beneath the data center or from another county away, there's a tax that's equal to the amount of money it would cost to replace that water with water from the ocean. And that'll slow them down. That big one data center they're putting in West Texas, well, the water's right under the
I was
property,
about
so
to
we're just
ask
sucking.
about that.
The water's right under the property. Well, two things. Once that water's gone, you can grow no food there for the next 1,000 years. And secondly, uh, when you pull natural gas out of the ground, really, it causes more fracking water problems for reinjection. So you're going to end up more quickly shutting down more wells. And that's going to, if they don't shut them down, then they're going to use HB 2549. They're going to be treating that water and putting it back on farmland. And then we'll really be toasting our land, because we won't be able to use, it'd be like the Johnson County farmers. They had to shut down their cattle farm because it PFAS on their farm. It's just a national tragedy, or a state tragedy. We're going to end up with a totally resource extracted Texas, and it'll be a disaster zone with no water, can't grow things. We'll be going to the food market in another 5 years, and there'll be labels. This is organic, and this is non-PFAS. And you think that you like to eat your beef, they're gonna it's gonna make the people that have got the patents on growing beef in a petri dish. They're gonna make the money, because we won't be able to have beef grown in Texas anymore. just like the Johnson County farmers, ranchers had to shut down their ranch. We won't be able to grow cows anymore.
Well, Mr. Achgill, we do have time for just one more question. Let's talk about overall, in your view, how would your policies benefit East Texans? And is there anything else you'd like to add here? We do have to go like 4 or 5 minutes, so keep it brief, please.
You'd have reading classes that are parent led in the middle of your schools, because the governor would have said on day one, there's a little bit of a park, a public park right in the middle of your school, and it's in this this class, or these classes, and so parents would be able to come in through FDA, not FDA, ADA. The ADA rule of the 70s says you have to give access to certain tools if they're affordable. So the deaf have been marginalized for eons. So by letting all children learn to read using the Bible with hand sign assist, all children are going to learn hand signs, so they'll be able to include all deaf children in their community. And so East Texans will have children that have a moral compass given back to them from an early age. They'll have access to the Bible through opt-in program, and they will have water to drink. They won't have polluted farmlands. They will have affordable houses, because no more 46% of houses in Bryan are owned by non-homeowners, by non-families. I don't know how it is in your communities, but you're going to have access. We're going to lose access to thyroid from the cow and from the pig in August, because FDA has said they're taking it off the shelves unless they get it approved by the billion-dollar process of checking it out. That's hubris. When they change this from that thyroid to the synthetic thyroid in the 60s, they didn't ask to check what we were leaving behind with an FDA level research. Now they're saying, oh, so we're going to have access to thyroid again. We're going to have doctors being able to monitor our ratio, reverse T3 to T3, and that'll help us not get into the hole of having heart diseases that are just electrochemical issues that could have been solved by thyroid, rather than having ablation on our heart muscle, which is it's totally ridiculous. You could be spending 50 cents a day instead of a $40,000 heart ablation. I'm just an engineer, so what do I know? But I know how to look at curves and see that when it changed from a linear increase to an exponential increase on chronic disease. So East Texans are going to be. You can make a change in this country by sending 5 emails to 5 friends, and by the time 7 layers deep of someone doing that, you're going to have reached every Texan with this website, www.hishandsreader.org/Bob, and they can see this informational game plan that'll vote for the guy that doesn't have any signs up all across Texas, and you will get the guy who's not going to be playing the fiddle with Rome on this thing. They're going to be open to what's the right thing to do, because they're not motivated by the $100 million. I went to go vote for my Texas state representative a year ago, and he had been given 90% of his donations came from Governor Abbott. That should be outlawed. The federal government doesn't allow that at the federal level. Why are we letting there be kingmakers from the governor at the state level? We should change that too. Transparency is, we're just running amok with not being having transparency, and they're playing we're playing checkers while they're playing chess. Thank you for having me on.
Of course,
I
Mr.
appreciate it.
Achgill, It was wonderful to get to know you and why you're running, a little bit of your background and your history. Thanks so much for coming on with us. This was Bob Achgill, who's running for Republican nomination for governor. As you did hear, he did talk about his website just a bit. But if you want more information, you can head on over to our website, and we will have more later today. Thank you so much for joining us today, and good luck.
Thank you. All right.